Welcome to the Boba Joe Show. Throwing up a diamond, bring it back, making it too sweet, finish off, get all the best hand signals in the start of the show.
All the signature hand gestures on display.
Yeah, I was
We're
reading
back. We had a
biography / exercise books. I was just thinking about he's talking about how he came up with the diamond cutter and from the basketball and all that.
Yeah, he's DDP is saving all our backs and our necks with his DDP yoga, getting us all loosey goosey and in good shape.
He's a top fella, and I rewatched that short doco he had for the WWE and all that. It was pretty much the same thing in the book and telling about his childhood, but that's not what we're talking about today. Today we must be talking about that the Clone Saga, which I'm still trying to get a refund. I went to the movie, I bought a ticket, I went in, there was too many Temuera Morrisons all running about the place. I said I want a refund, I'm going home. Haven't got a refund to this day, but I think that's the topic.
Yeah, close enough. You know, you are not you, you're me. It's, how do I know that you're the real you and that I'm the real me?
I'm not a doppelganger. I'm not from a mirror universe or alternate timeline reality. I must be a clone. That's how you know.
I suppose I better, just put it out there straight away because we are talking about the Spider-Man Clone Saga today. I'm just going to say it. I actually like this, okay? I know this is something that gets kind of poo-pooed on by most people, and there's a lot of poop to poop on, and we will get to that poop. And I'm holding back on bad language here because it's early in the video. I know the algorithm likes when you do that. But
I like it when
we will get to the bad.
Fuck off with that.
As well as good. But yeah, the Spider-Man Clone Saga, it was this is what was happening in the comics universe just as I was really getting into Spider-Man as a youngster. So I think that's the reason why I have maybe a warmer place in my heart for it than a lot of other people.
Yeah,
but
I unknowingly started reading the Clone Saga not knowing what it was or anything about it in the 90s. I'd been buying random dollar bin issues of Spider-Mans and Batmans and X-Men and kind of reading stuff from the comic shop, like kind of naughty, a little bit of this, as I was buying things, looking for a book to start buying a monthly. And I picked the most weirdest time to start buying a monthly Spider-Man because it ballooned from 1, 2 to 4 monthly titles, one a week basically. And right around 95, 96, I started buying Spider-Man ongoing and read it right through the year 2000. And I had no idea what I was getting into, that this was the place of all Spider-Man's history to start collecting the book in an ongoing way. And I went back and I read back issues from 1990 up to 95, and I continued to read the books up to about 2005. So I read everything in about 15 years span. And this was like the craziest time to be jumping on a Spider-Man book.
It was a whirlwind of a time to be getting into it. And I can only imagine what it was like trying to pick up those titles individually because there's so many different Spider-Man titles on the go at the same time. Yeah, there was 4
monthlies, and then you had the annuals, and then you had a quarterly called Spider-Man Unlimited that cost like 3 times. It was 64 pages, but it cost 3 times the price. Most of the stories and tie and other stuff. But at the same time, they had a mini-series about Death of Dr. Octopus. They had mini-series tying with the clone stuff and one-off. That there was so many books. It was crazy. But Batman also had 4 monthly books. Superman had 4 monthly books. X-Men was up to 8 or 10 monthly books if you include Excalibur and X-Factor and X-Force and all them. So Spider-Man was trying to follow the style of all this oversaturated market of all these too many books other companies and heroes were doing.
Well, you may recall when we spoke about, I think we were talking about, it was our print magazines show that we did.
The UK reprints?
And the UK reprints. And I was talking about it's that astonishing Spider-Man comic that I would buy. And yeah, lucky there. But I was really lucky, man, because I did not have to do the whole, okay, I have to buy Spectacular Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man, you know, Web of Spider-Man, all that stuff.
Sometimes they were out of order each month because they were late when they shipped or when they finished them. So you'd get part 3 of the story instead of part 1.
Yeah, like just I did not have to jump through those hoops. I was lucky enough when I got into it. So I suppose if the Clone Saga, I suppose in the States, it was going on and from like 94 onwards. But when I probably started reading was more like 95, 96. And I was reading through these astonishing Spider-Man, you know, comics. They're kind of their collection. Basically what they would do is they would print 3 or 4 stories in one volume. So like even for this one here, I have you know, that cover with Kane ripping off the Spider-Man.
That's cool. Oh yeah, and you got those UK exclusive covers like the old Transformers reprints. So you got the new
exactly
covers is cool.
But this, so say the first 3/4 of this issue is taken up with, you know, what was the contemporary Clone Saga stuff. But then the last few pages, they'd always dedicate to classic Spider-Man stories. So you see here, we got the old, you know,
nice. Yeah, I love how they would do a classic reprint.
But so I suppose the point though I'm trying to make is that I am getting introduced to all this Spider-Man all at the same time. So I'm like on one end, I'm trying to get my head around all this complicated clone stuff, but I'm also still learning the history and the lore of the general character and universe.
Yeah, I had read a few reprints of various stuff. They used to do. There would be in the 90s sometimes reprints of older ones. It might have been Spider-Man Classic. There was a few different titles, Marvel this, Marvel that. They would reprint just older books from the 60s and 70s, and you occasionally pick them up the dollar bin. So if I found stuff like that, I would read it. So I did know, before I read the Clone Saga, I knew who his classic villains were. I'd watched all the animated series in the 90s which showed a lot of those 60s, 70s kind of redone stories with, like, you know, Rhino and Vulture and all that.
Yeah, because I was jumping into the 90s cartoon at the same time as well. So
that was such a good show. I watched it again last year, and it's excellent.
Fantastic show. One of the best animated series of all time.
I love that they used
probably my favorite.
Definitely my favorite of all the Spider-Man shows before and after. It's one of the best. I love that for the animation models, they use the Romita Senior for like Peter and Mary Jane, like when they're in their 20s, like the college years. He's like thicker and a bit more built. He's not so much the scrawny teenager anymore. Because sometimes people can see that and think, gee, Spider-Man looks a bit like Captain America. He's got like wide chest. I'm like, yes, because that's Romita Senior art from when he went to college, and he went from being the 15-year-old wrestling, you know, the not macho man wrestler like in the movie and that, to being like an actual adult and his body filled out. Plus he'd been Spider-Man for like 5 or 10 years. He's like exercising every day. He's getting thicker and bigger muscles.
Yeah, he's jacked. He's like a 90s kind of action figure, you know, in that cartoon. He's buff.
Yeah, he is.
Had you ever read the original Clone Saga, the kind of baseline story?
Yes, I have. Actually, I think I have the trade of it that I randomly picked up one day. It was like issue 149, 150 of amazing.
So if we're trying to break it down, I guess, from the beginning, so you have Professor Miles Warren. He makes clones of Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker, and then he does this like weird, like voyeuristic matchmaking, like let's have the clones get together and I'm just going to observe.
Yeah, you know? He's definitely a creepy weirdo. Like he was never like a top tier Spidey villain. He was like someone who came along years later after the classic villains had been established as just a kind of B tier sort of villain who was more known as their college professor and later known as the Jackal. But he's just wearing like a crummy costume.
Yeah, he's yeah, I'd agree with his ranking.
And he's an old man. I don't know, he's meant to be at least 60 or 70. I think, but look at his mustache and hair. He's still like silver and grey looking.
Like he has a big crush obviously on Gwen Stacy. Yes. So when she is killed off in the storyline, this has a major effect on him, which is what.
Which at least this is like university years. It's still inappropriate, the old teacher crush, but at least that they're all adults, so it takes out some of the creep factor.
But like that's you know, that original Clone Saga is a kind of short,
Oh, it's very short.
self-contained deal. And you know, it has a resolution at the end with the real Spider-Man, coming a
Dumping a
cropper of
corpse.
what's going on with these
Hence
clones,
my
and you know,
title.
yeah, exactly. Um, the clone, as we know, falls down the chimney, and it's never to be spoken of again until
Was he fooled or
it
was
is
he
to be spoken of.
dumped and pushed and like, bye, let's bury this corpse? It's like kind of hit and run. It's like, whoops, let's just pretend this never happened. Off I go, back to my
Yeah,
adventures.
it's a very it was a brutal end anyway to that short kind of
Yeah,
story. Just dropping him down there, like, you know, you're not gonna like bury him or something,
not
you
going to
know.
talk to the Avengers or the Fantastic Four, but like, I've got a corpse. It looks like me. You guys understand these things? Can you help me out here? Don't want to get the police involved. Reed Richards, looking in your direction.
Yeah, that was like the basic original Clone Saga storyline, kind of self-contained, little short, interesting story, and definitely not a bad story by any
Yeah,
means.
they had a couple of narrative threads that were really nothing to do with Spider-Man, but more Marvel MCU random stuff. Years later, the Gwen Stacy clone turned up again alive, and then for some reason, the High Evolutionary, who's another Marvel character into genetic engineering, wanted to find out about Miles Warren, aka Jackal's cloning research, because he wanted to use some research on himself for some whatever nonsense story they were up to, but didn't really relate to Spider-Man. It's just like some writer's like, oh, I'm going to use this narrative thread just for the hell of it, you know.
But you know, years later, we're coming into the 90s, and in the early 90s, like 92, and we're going to be getting to this in an upcoming episode when we talk about the death of Superman. But there's a real shift in the comics sphere, and these kind of dramatic storylines that are kind of turning the comics world upside down. We've got the death of Superman, we've got Batman being replaced, getting his
Yeah,
back
broken his
broken, that whole
back.
Nightfall saga, and a load of other stuff that was mentioned on the little ticker. If any of you were paying attention at the start of today's
Yeah,
episode, you
Thor,
would have
Green
seen.
Lantern, Iron Man, they all got sort of swapped out, replaced. First they got edgy different costumes, but then they got like total replacements. And it's like, I was thinking about this earlier today, and it's like, when we got to the 90s, it's like, if you liked all these wholesome 60s, 70s superheroes and do-gooders, it's like they're not cool enough for the skateboarding, mutant, neon tracksuit wearing 90s kids watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Saved by the Bell. We've got to have like edgy stuff and, you know, pockets and bigger guns and crazy costumes, and just everything was like edgelord, over the top crazy stuff. And that's before Spawn came around.
Yeah, but you know, the Marvel were like, well, we got to get in on this, and
Yes, it was
Spider-Man's
very
got to
much
get
a
in on this.
marketing, cynical marketing, like the Superman and Batman storylines where they both got replaced. Marvel's like, oh, look at the sales of that. We need to do something like that. So they're kind of just throwing shit at the wall, these different ideas, and they ran through a bunch of different ideas. But the one that stuck was like, well, what about if we do the clone from that story we mentioned earlier back in Amazing 149, 150? What if we brought that character back and did something with that? And at first they kind of laughed and went, no, this is ridiculous, let's not. But then they went, hang on, we haven't got any better ideas, so I guess we will.
To be fair, and you know, at least initially, it starts off, you know, pretty well.
Oh, the beginning of
In
it's
terms
fine.
of
The
who can
beginning of it's
win.
quite solid, and it's very much like in the style of all the other 90s heroes getting replaced temporarily for maybe a year, and then they come back again.
And you know, once again, at the time I'm reading this, I'm reading all Spider-Man together. Essentially, it feels like both past, present, and whatever. And maybe it's not having the same impact on me. I just saw the character of Ben Reilly as this cool character, and it wasn't really bothering me that they were trying to kind of reposition him as like the main Spider-Man. Like that didn't seem to really offend me. Really, maybe like the way it did a lot of other maybe longer term fans that were like just
It
loved
didn't for me
Peter
either,
Parker.
because I
And
was a new reader to ongoing, even though I'd read stuff, you know, 5 or 10 years beforehand, but with just random issues, not full runs of things. So I didn't get what all these in the letters page, people are writing in quite early going, why are you replacing Peter? Why are you doing this? Not till years later, I'd really understand that went, oh, here's this character people have grown up with and enjoyed for decades. And now you're going, oh, no, that's fake. And this other guy, he's the real guy. You've been reading a clone all these years. So I can see why people got upset.
And that's, I think you've kind of just touched on it there, and we may as well. I don't care about jumping around, so we may as well jump into it now. I think what really soured a lot of people wasn't the idea that this guy was going to replace Peter Parker. It was the idea that this guy actually was the real Peter Parker, and that other Peter Parker that you'd been invested in, oh no, he was the bullshit fucking clone doppelganger. And the whole thing with they were trying to like essentially move him out of the picture. He's going to go off with Mary Jane. They're going to have the baby, and Ben Reilly who's actually Peter Parker, is now going to be the main guy. And I think a lot of people were just like, "What the fuck?
Yeah,
you can't do this." Like,
and they did a miniseries then where Peter temporarily lost his powers. So it was like he's going to go away, have a baby, retire, and then Ben was going to take over. And to an extent he did, because he took over as Scarlet Spider. And then we had Sensational Spider-Man, where he became the full Spider-Man with a new redesigned costume. And I really like this costume. All the Spider-Man costume variants over the years are like the Alien Black costume, Venom, Scarlet Spider, and Sensational. Those are my top tier favorites redesigns of Spider-Man costumes. All excellent.
Yeah, the Scarlet Spider costume is very cool. Real kind of, it's like a thrown together look, like he's got like his unfinished spandex. He's got the hoodie over it.
Arms off.
And of course he's they're from the same seed, a clone of my own. He's the clone of Peter Parker, so obviously he possesses Peter's scientific knowledge, but he has a slightly different approach to implementing certain things. He's coming at things from a different angle. He invents the impact webbing, which is a pretty cool deal.
He lived on the mean streets of Utah for a number of years, and they did some Riley the Lost Years miniseries. It was quite cool because it had Romita Jr. doing the artwork, where he's on that full-on scratchy mode, where just like every character has like, well, basically my kind of stubble, but then the Parker wavy hair going everywhere, and they look like everyone looks like Lorenzo Lamas and Romita Jr.'s artwork at that point.
He's different enough that you can, I wonder if they just kept the Scarlet Spider as the Scarlet Spider, didn't try to do the whole switcheroo, and just kept them as like another Spider-Man that still coexisted with your original Spider-Man.
There was a point where they were going to do that, and because he started appearing towards the end of the saga, he started appearing in some issues of the New Warriors and became part of the team temporarily. And at one point, they were actually going to spin him off when they decided that Peter was definitely going to come back. They were going to spin him off and try and have him as another solo character, like another Ghost Rider or Blade or Doctor Strange, in his own book or in a team book. So I find it really disappointing that they didn't do that, because to me that would have been a better ending than what they did do.
Oh, totally. And it's one of those
like
things.
Superboy didn't get killed. The Eradicator and Cyborg Superman didn't get killed. Good guys, bad guys. Those characters are still around.
And of course, so Ben he's essentially like he's a perfect clone, I guess you could say, and he will eventually dye his hair blonde just to try and distinguish himself from the regular Peter Parker. But there is, of course, another clone who is a main character in this whole saga, and that would be Kane. Gotta be Kane.
He was definitely another cool costume character. It was very mysterious, and he had the hand where it left like a mark on people and killed them, and that tied into the mini series where it went back to the Salt Lake City, and some cop guy was chasing a serial killer, which turned out to be Kane.
Yes. And that's the thing about Kane. He is a physically deformed clone of Peter Parker.
He's the only one that's deformed that didn't turn into powder or dust, but he's still alive.
Yes. Though he got he got hit with the ugly stick, definitely.
Yeah.
However, he was blessed when it came to powers and abilities, because he has all of Spider-Man's abilities except they're enhanced, so instead of just being able to stick to a wall, he can actually just put his hand against the wall and pull the entire wall down. Like he's got super strength,
I think he's strong, but stronger as well.
Yeah, much stronger. And that's where the whole kind of Mark of Kane thing comes in, isn't it? Because he'll leave that grip on your face,
I can never work out how that worked, but now it makes sense.
And also, instead of just, Spider-Man got the spider sense, which gives him, the early warning alarm, whereas Kane has full on, I'm able to see into the future, possibly. Like when my
Yeah, he
spider
has
sense goes off.
visions, otherwise known as editorial visions.
Yes, yeah. But man, I thought Kane was a really cool villain. And
Yeah, I've resisted buying that action figure they put out, even though I did a really nice one, it was on the animated card, which is weird, but I still might get it. I've kind of like done on Marvel Legends now, and I'm trying not to buy more shelf fillers. But they did a really nice version of that Kane, which was surprising to see him so many years later in the modern toy line.
I did cave on Kane because I'm a massive Kane fan. Not so much Kane the wrestler, but Kane from the Clone Saga. Definitely a big fan. I just always thought he was a really cool villain, really sinister. I always loved the whole, like, they'd always write his like inner monologue as he'd be like watching Peter and Ben Riley from the shadows, and he was so resentful of both of them. Like, he's obviously,
Yeah,
well,
it's
he's
quite
more resentful of
psychological,
Ben
almost more like a
Riley.
Batman villain.
Yeah, like he's really jealous of Ben Riley because of obviously Ben turned out the more kind of pristine clone, and he kind of has this weird like obsessive kind of, he wants to kind of protect Peter Parker and doesn't want his life to be interfered with in any way, but then that manifests itself in really violent outcomes, like when he kills Dr. Octopus and all this other great, like, that's another thing. The Clone Saga could also be just renamed, the Death Saga. Let's fucking just
Yeah,
kill everybody,
yeah,
like,
who doesn't die?
And that's actually the whole thing behind that story with Kane in that, like, basically because, like, guys like Dr. Octopus have been killed and the Grim Hunter's been killed, lots of Spider-Man's enemies get together and they're like, okay, look, this guy Kane seems to be like killing off enemies of Spider-Man, so now we need to like band together and we need to hunt him down, which
It's
of
quite
course results
serious. You might
in,
have escaped from Image Comics where people die all the time. We need to do something about it.
yeah, like, so there's a whole like calamitous team up of like Hobgoblin and a bunch of other guys, which of course goes horribly wrong when Kane shows up and like beats the shit out of all of them. Don't think he kills any of them though, so that's good. They do manage to make it out with their lives still intact. But it just feeds more into that whole, like you were saying, with the death of Superman and what's going on in Batman and other comics. It's like edgy. We got to kill people. We got to make sure these characters are
Yeah,
dead.
and
It's serious stuff.
the books were darker too, not just psychologically darker. Some of the inking and the art was like quite dark in those Kane stories and books. And Sal Buscema was doing some real scratchy art and all of those ones too. It could be kind of exaggerated, almost like almost like some of those Bill Sienkiewicz pictures where he's doing those abstract ones where there's lots of scratches and lines going everywhere, and it would really go into the kind of almost like horror, dark themes of the Kane stuff and the twisted into the psyche.
Because some of those, the way Kane is drawn, like, there is a very, the way sometimes there's like he has no facial features at all. All you see
If
is a
Man
black
Thing
silhouette and
was a
two red
superhero
eyes.
in blue with crazy wild hair, it would be Kane. It's
Yeah,
like his face is just like a void sometimes.
yeah, it's a dark void with these kind of two red eyes sometimes.
Mm.
Just, you'll see, or maybe his hair will be colored and that's all you'll
Yeah,
see against the black. But just a very cool character design, and
yeah, I always
a
liked it.
scary character in a lot of ways.
And they even bring his kind of deformity into his costume because he has almost like external veins or stuff all over his costume that's kind of reflect that he's deformed underneath.
Yeah, and he's got the weird his fingertips and even around his wrist, he's kind of spikes and stuff coming out of his costume, which you kind of imagine his body is gradually kind of malforming more and more the older he gets.
Yeah,
So
he's meant to be like deteriorating slowly in that.
but yeah, he was the imperfect clone, and Miles Warren, the Jackal, he just discarded him like he was nothing. He probably should have, taken care of him, because he was a pretty dangerous entity to leave alive and walking around. But he definitely plays his role in the Clone Saga, and that's pretty hardcore when Doc Ock gets unalive. Like, that's
I think
a
then he
really
like
big
snapped
deal.
his neck or something like that.
Yeah, it's really like like Doc's trying to fight him. You know, he's obviously got the mechanical arms, but like Kane's like ducking and dodging, and then he just he gets in on him, and it's pretty like he like cracks his neck or something. It's a really
And
nasty.
it did stay dead for a number of years, and then because they had a female Doctor Octopus who was kind of like an apprentice who took over with the arms and didn't really go anywhere, wasn't popular. And they did stay dead for a good number of years before they brought him back again. I mean, eventually they never bloody back to life in comics, of course.
Yeah, he was like resurrected in some ritual, like by the hand or something, wasn't he? It was like some weird.
I haven't read when he first comes back. I read the story later on by Dan Slott where he became some disembodied spirit or mind, whatever, and took over a Spider-Man's actual body and became Spider-Man in the books for like over a year.
Yeah, because that meant something at the time, Doc Ock going down. Like he had been kind of like he's one of the big heavy hitters when it comes to the Spider-Man villains. Like you could definitely consider him a main villain. So for him to be taken out, it was kind of sad as well because the whole reason he's even involved in the storyline. So they have this kind of ongoing story throughout the Clone Saga in the first half where Peter Parker's actually sick. There's something wrong with him and he's losing his powers, but he also appears to be dying as well. Like he's actually becoming physically frail and, he's just, not able to go about his day-to-day life, never mind being Spider-Man. And shockingly, it's actually Dr. Octopus that comes forward to try and help develop a cure for him. And
the man of science.
Doc Ock's his entire motivation, it's really twisted. It's like, you are my enemy, but you're also the only person in life who's ever really challenged me. And I don't want you to die because I think my life would be empty without you. So I'm going to actually save your life just so I can continue to fight you again. That's his whole motivation.
It's like he turned into Alfred Molina Doc Ock for a 5-minute scene, became nice before he went evil again.
But I think though, that's what makes it kind of tragic by the time Kane does get round to killing him off, because he had helped Peter, and you do kind of feel like, that Otto Octavius character anyway was always a kind of likable character. He did always have a real human side to him.
Yeah, he's a great character. They did a 3-issue miniseries. I think it was called Funeral for an Octopus, and that tied in at the same time as well. So they got a whole 3-issue miniseries just about him dying.
Yeah, and that's another one that I believe involves a lot of the enemies trying to come together and make sense of what's going on. And it's like, I mentioned as well, Kane, he killed off the Grim Hunter in a story as well. But the thing about the Grim Hunter was only really introduced that year. And he's the son of Craven the Hunter, but he hadn't been around long enough. Like by the time he got killed off, you didn't care that much because he was a fairly new character anyway. Yeah, like he had the link to Craven, but that was all it was. Like it was more like he's associated because he's his son. So when he got killed off by Kane, like it was a cool story, but it wasn't something that was really going to be making you go, "Oh my God, I can't believe the Grim Hunter is not going to be around anymore." That guy who only turned up a few months ago isn't going to be around anymore. Oh no.
It's like telling me, "Oh no, Punisher 2099 died." I'm like, "Who? What?"
Yeah. But when Doc Ock went down, man, that was a big deal. Like it felt like one of the more significant moments during the entire endeavor.
And that was followed like only about three months or 4 issues later in Amazing, we got to 400 and they killed off Aunt May, and that had a special Tombstone gatefold cover because I remember buying that issue.
Yeah, it really was the era of death, and because for a while there, they kind of led us to believe that Aunt May would be okay, because you get to see she's in a coma for a while, isn't she? And you're kind of seeing what's going on inside her mind, and you think, oh, she's not going to go to the light, she's going to come out of it, but that's not really how it kind of works out. But it's just, tragedy. You need more tragedy in these stories, to really
it used to be,
get it over the line.
She stayed dead for a number of years, and there was kind of an old Marvel rule or gag. It was only Bucky and Aunt May and Uncle Ben stay dead, and then it's like eventually it's like, no, let's just break the rules on all of those things.
Yeah, and that's what it is when it comes down to it. They're going to do it one way or the other. They'll either they'll either bring them back officially within the current canon, or what they'll do is they'll just relaunch or reboot something.
Yeah, relaunch the Ultimate Spider-Man or new movies. I wasn't a fan. Like when Aunt May died, they made a really big thing of it, and I wasn't too keen. And when they brought her back, I can't remember exactly when it was she came back, but it was really convoluted, and I thought, no, it was too soon. Like the only Marvel death I didn't mind when they did Bucky Winter Soldier, because that would have been like, I don't know, like 40 years. Like, and the story made sense from Ed Brubaker. It wasn't like, I will kill this character and then just a year or 2 or 5 years, now they're back and it means nothing. It's like, no, 30 or 40 years had gone by before that character came back.
Well, speaking of characters coming back, and even though it's not like he wasn't killed off in this storyline, but he was kind of resurrected as part of it. Green Goblin comes back. The original Green Goblin comes back as a result of this.
That was like another,
well.
what do you call it, Deus Ex Machina, where the writers wrote themselves into so many corners and circles they couldn't figure out what the hell to do. And then they agreed they were going to kind of wind up the Clone Saga and came up with some ideas to finish it up. But then a lot of the people got fired or downsized off the books, and other people came along, and that all they went out the window. That's part of the reason why it kept dragging on. Plus, the apparently the sales on certain stuff was quite popular, so they got told to keep it going, even though the original ideas kind of got thrown out the window to do like the Batman Superman ones, kind of replace them for a year or so, maybe 2 in the comics, and then bring the guy back and basically reset it. They ended up extending it and throwing out all these weird curveballs and things that made no sense, and became everything started contradicting what would have come before.
Yeah, it'd start getting murky, and
part of it we had Bob Budiansky to thank for, who's known for Transformers comics.
Especially, because Goblin had obviously been a major villain, another main event.
And his death is meaningful. I think it was like, was it Spectacular 200 or whatever? He used to be on the wall at the comic shop. I think it had a foil cover, and he was getting impaled by his own glider or whatever.
And I know I haven't, as I've been rereading recently, because I have picked up, some of these Marvel Epic collections that are doing like their Saga volumes.
I've been tempted to get those.
I haven't gotten as far along yet, but they also, you probably remember from this cover, they introduced a new Green Goblin as well.
Yes, that ran for 25 issues. I bought all of that, and it had a holodisc cover on 2 of them, like a little circle, like 90s as ever. It had a hologram that was a circle, and you'd tilt it like a lenticular hologram, like those flare cards. That was Ben Urich, the Daily Bugle reporter, his nephew. I think it was Phil or something like that. But it ran for 25 issues. He's basically like Hobgoblin. He stumbles across another old storehouse of the then in continuity deceased original goblins, both like Harry and Norman. But he was like a teenager, found the one of these New York storehouses, not unlike one of the Batman or Punisher cash sitting around to stuff equipment. But he was a good guy. He just decided to be a good hero rather than the villain. So that's like another version. It was actually a pretty decent comic. But you can almost kind of read it in exclusion to what else was going on in Marvel and Spider-Man at the time. But it doesn't really, it's kind of a standalone series. It was actually reasonable. Even though now you just look at it and go, why? Why does it exist? It's pointless. Too much.
Yeah. Because you're just, oh my God, like another title. But I had actually never read the solo series. I only knew of that.
Only because I was buying the monthlies, I just started buying it and read the whole thing.
I wonder, is it collected?
Probably not. I doubt it was popular, because it was really like, it was that Batman X-Men thing where it's like, here's the 4 core monthlies, here's the extra ones. Now here's extra crap for the really hardcore people that just, if you've got to read everything that's related to those characters, you'll read it, but otherwise it's pointless.
But it was, it just goes to show though, they were spinning so many plates at once. It's not hard.
Actually, they gave him a new power, which is cool. They tied it back to the original 2 goblins. They has a new piece of tech they hadn't used. It was a goblin laugh, where it was like an amplified sound that would hurt your ears sonically, like Banshee and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they've so we got new Green Goblins. We've got the old Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, being resurrected from the dead.
Goblin, the Demo Goblin.
Yeah, Hobgoblin gets he gets messed up by Kane pretty badly in that kind of botched
And
coming
that was
together of both
Mackendale
of
then,
them.
wasn't it?
That was Mackendale, and of course, I know we're kind of we're not getting too off topic because it happens later in Sensational Spider-Man with Ben Reilly. Doesn't Mackendale end up getting loads of like cybernetic enhancements, and he becomes like
Yeah,
a
he gets
cyborg
like
version of the
it's like an
Hobgoblin?
eye. Yeah, he gets cyborg stuff and all kinds of weird stuff. It's funny reading those ones. I like they did a one shot thing years later with the actual proper original Hobgoblin that was like Kingsley as it was
Yes,
written, but never published at the time. And I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. The proper story,
it's a brilliant story. The name of that story
not
is
Ned
called
Lee's. Ned Lee's was
Hobgoblin.
like the patsy.
Hobgoblin Lives is the name of that story you're
Yeah,
talking
that
about.
was excellent.
It's so good, and that even includes a bit where they actually show that the original Hobgoblin goes to the prison where Jason Mackendale is and like assassinates him in prison. But you see in that prison he's got all the cybernetic shit still on his face, you know. Like, so I like that they actually kept it, you know, they kept the
Yeah,
continuity there. And that's the thing. I think though maybe with comics especially, it's harder to kind of retcon and change shit on the fly, especially when you have a fan base that tends to like reread stuff and revisit it.
they
It
still do it
means
though.
that
They
when
still do
you,
it today. They still retcon so many things.
but it fucks you up in the head because like as a fan, when you start kind of thinking like, oh well, maybe this is starting to not make sense now. Like based on what I've read so far, I thought he was the clone. Now you're telling me he's not the clone, but now you're telling me no, actually he is the clone again. And
And
not
then they
only
said
is he
they're
definitely
both
the
clones.
clone, yeah, but only this
And
one
then
guy is going to turn the
there was
dust, you
another
know?
alternate storyline element, not in the comics, but one they're actually seriously considering. And I was having a quick read today, but just about the other like original drafts and ideas and stuff that was scrapped and all that. So one they'd seriously considered, and it has to be one of the dumbest fucking ideas ever heard. They're both Peter Parker, but one has traveled back in time. I was like, get
Yes.
out of here, that shit. So that they're
Yeah.
both Peter Parker, but they're just existing at the same point in time. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that was just the
Stop with
worst
that.
idea. But they were
Yeah, that's a
seriously
terrible
considering doing
idea.
that to help wind it up. And I was like, no, that's awful.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't stick
That's some like Thomas Riker
with that
level
idea.
shit. Like, no.
Oh, big time. But that's the thing, and like, you know, and as it would get more complicated, and like you had mentioned earlier, they tried to spin Peter Parker off. What was that? It was like Spider-Man: The Final Adventure, isn't that what they called the
Yes,
storyline?
that
And it
was it.
was
They had 4 issues. Also had all foil covers, like
yeah.
gold and silver foil covers, so they could charge more and
So
slightly
Peter
glossier paper
Parker.
because they bought them all.
So we think now at this point in the storyline that Peter Parker is the clone, but he's going to go and have a life
Yes.
away from the
Yep.
city. He's going to
Mary Jane lost his powers, going to have a baby.
yeah, yeah. But then he gets a job with this. Is this? Am I correct in saying he gets a job with the same scientific company that actually built the original neogenic recombinator that irradiated the spider that gave him his powers to begin with? I believe
I
is what
forget the
happens.
names of it, but yeah, it was something along those lines. It was like he was getting back to like pure science, away from superhero,
Yes.
Fantastic Four shit, just science.
And during his tenure at this company, he does some type of examination of his own blood, and the sample of his blood is kind of left unattended. And then another scientist who works there like makes some serum out of his blood. They use it to treat some like terminally ill patient who then like becomes this weird mutated spider freak thing that Peter Parker has to like take down. It's
He
a short
clearly
story, but
learned
it's
nothing
pretty
from the She-Hulk
hardcore.
comics.
Yeah, yeah. I did actually enjoy that mini story though, that final
Yeah, that's
adventure.
kind of getting into horror John Carpenter sort of territory there, because they did do some what if in the what if comics. Now we're really getting in the 90s. They did what if like Spider-Man. Remember he turned to that 6-arm version, then it mutated into the spider, both in the comics and the animation. They did a what if where what if he turned to that crazy 6-armed spider thing in the beginning and just became a murderous thing that was rampaging, killing everyone in the town. They did that as a what if comic. They did in the late 90s. They did kind of horror versions of stuff. And that was one of the stories I did that was actually really cool.
Another what if could be, you know, what if he just did what a real person would do if bitten by a radioactive spider and just, passed away
Passed
passed
away
away slowly after having his blood
after you go wrestle the
irradiated and
Macho
poisoned.
Man. You're all high on those spider fumes. You wrestle Macho Man, and then you pass away in the coma afterwards.
Yeah, it just like circling back to Clone Saga, it was getting crazier and crazier, and it's like one of those wrestling storylines that gets so
Yeah,
convoluted.
Days of Our
It
Lives
gets to a
mixed with
point.
WWE around '99. It's like,
I think maybe by the time they decided to kind of draw a line under it, it didn't really matter at that stage what way it was going to end because they twisted things around so much.
The writers and the editors had all gotten fatigued. A number of them, some of them had quit because they were sick of it, and some of them had been replaced, not in a hostile way, but you know how writers and editors change over anyway, year to year on books and whatever. And then also a lot of the fans had gotten sick of it. New fans and old fans were writing in droves, going, just like, end this thing already.
And it's one of those things, like I said, if I'd been a little bit older and I'd been into Spider-Man for a longer time, it probably would have had that same impact on me.
Yeah. It's like if you're 5 years old
fresh
and watching Hulk Hogan, you're going, he's the best guy ever. And if you're 30, you're just going, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, everything was so fresh to me in terms of what Spider-Man was. I just was soaking it all in, and
I'd read enough early
have that
90s Spider-Man
experience
to get the general gist of it, and the Mark Bagley stuff and all that, and he's hanging out with Daredevil and Punisher, and they'd read quite a few reprints of 60s ones to know what the original ones were like. So at least I knew the general style and flavor of Spider-Man, but I hadn't read 70s, 80s stuff at that point to see all the other later stories and characters.
And even, like, for the finale of the Spider-Man animated series, there's even, like, they do Clone Saga references. They obviously have Scarlet Spider. Yeah, they've Scarlet Spider there. He even has the line, like, he makes a comment that he's not even sure if he's the clone or the real guy. So they're obviously, like, even like acknowledging what's going on in the comics and stuff. It's it was just everywhere.
Yeah, I was reading the books at that time when the episode was on. I was like, oh, that's cool. They had a little cameo from Scarlet Spider in the cartoon. And I think on one of the other Spider-Mans had the 6 arms again too.
That's right. It's a great
one of the best elements that did come out of the Clone Saga. We got that Green Goblin book was kind of middle of the road sort of thing, didn't need to exist. But we had an issue of What If, where in the story it was that somehow Norman Osborn had spirited away this unborn or possibly stillborn baby of Mary Jane. It was a very demented, very male writer-centric sort of thing that when you read it now, it's kind of disgusting the way they just treat Mary Jane in the story. She's just like an afterthought. So not a good plot element, but very Days of Our Lives. It's, it's going to be like bloody aliens or demon possession, or it's a still unborn baby with spirited away in the middle of the night, never to be heard from again, and we never see it come up again in the comics. But then we get a What If issue. What if Spider-Man and Mary Jane did have that kid, and it grew up to be a nice, healthy kid and became the Amazing Spider-Girl? And it was so popular, and I bought that issue, and then it launched off into a #1, and every few years it got cancelled, but it ran for 100 issues. And it's the longest running Marvel female book ever of anything, like longer running than a Black Widow book or any other female character you care to name outside of a team.
That's wild. All from a What If,
and an excellent character.
Popular.
And they did they did another book in the 90s of Spider-Man called Untold Tales of Spider-Man that was set back in the 60s in his original years by Pat Olive and I forget the names of the other guys. And it had a kind of retro Steve Ditko art style to it. The team that was on that book went on to do the Spider-Girl book. So they did a very kind of retro style book that was very simplified. Ironically, when the Spider-Clone Saga began, one of the editorial things was they wanted to try and simplify the books and make it not so complicated and easy to get into, which I ended up doing the opposite. But the Spider-Girl book ended up being the book that did simplify things and was easy for new readers and had a smaller cast, and it had like an alternate universe MC2 that was separate than Marvel 2099. But it was a really excellent book. I bought at least the first 20 plus issues of it.
Before they were thinking, or before they decided, I should say, that they were going to bring back Norman Osborn as the whole, or one of the main architects of the whole clone deal, they were toying with the idea of resurrecting Harry Osborn and having it just being about him wanting revenge. Like, it's just, they really were just, I don't know, they just were totally
I was just
undecided
reading,
in what direction to go.
I was reading earlier today, like Bob Budiansky, who we know from Transformers and who was the main, when the Clone Saga kicked off, he was the editor-in-chief over the overall books, which is not an enviable job at the best of times for anyone. But even when he was leaving and seeing what a bit of a mess things were, his final thing was, do not bring back Norman Osborn, don't touch the story, it's a terrible idea. But then he left, and then I think it was Bob Harris came in and said, we're bringing back Norman Osborn.
Yeah. And, you know, once again, because I'm still pretty fresh, so it's more like, you know, oh, it's just another twist for me. But for long-term fans, it's probably like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you actually? You're undoing so much. You know,
at the time, it was really disrespectful to the older stories, and it made no sense. And like, I'll just jump to my notes. I made 2 bullet points that if you read anything about criticism of the Saga thing, these always come up with like, if he was really in the background manipulating the Jackal, Judas Traveler, Scryer, Ben, Kane, like presumably the cop over in Utah in a completely different state, who was like tracking Kane as a serial killer, manipulating all his events, and Mary Jane and the unborn baby, supposedly while over in Europe, not even in a completely different country. Why did they let his son Harry die? Why did they let him die do nothing? Why did they let the Hobgoblin steal all his shit, including his personal journals, his equipment, all sorts of secrets, and all sorts of other stuff? Why did they let the other Green Goblin, the third version, who was that young kid of the Phil Urich's nephew, why did they let him steal a whole bunch of other stuff and do nothing? And it just makes no sense. Makes no sense at all. And they just hung back and did nothing all this time, just as it's a total narrative writer editor do-over where none of it was part of any of it, and we just added an after fact, and they go, oh yeah, it was him all along. And it makes no sense and contradicts just about everything that happened before it.
Yeah, like even if you take out all the whole allowing your own family and stuff to die while you sit back in the shadows and watch it all, even if you're just going to ignore that stupidity, being able to like manipulate the movements of like Judas Traveler, who's introduced as this bloody like almost godlike, you know, entity.
It turns out to be more like a magician charlatan because they knew they went nowhere with that character.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The worst, I'll tell you, the best thing and the worst thing of the Osborn legacy of this nonsense and bringing him back during this saga, because I want to stick to these 90s stories. Well, I'll briefly touch on stuff that came after the year 2000. First, the worst thing they ever did in fucking Marvel Spider-Man comics, and I'm not talking about the Mary Jane Mephisto story. I'm talking about the other story that's even worse than that, where Norman Osborn, during this alleged time in Europe, had these 2 other illegitimate kids with Gwen Stacy, who was also fucking dead. That was probably the worst Spider-Man story ever, that I picked up one day in a comic shop years later and put it on Others Discussed, and never read another Spider-Man comic for over 10 years. The good thing they did with him years later, once it'd been about 10, 15 years, he was back and we're beyond all this stuff. They did like, I think it was during the Dark Reign, he became like the Lex Luthor of the Marvel Universe, created his own secret Avengers who replaced all the Avengers as bad guy versions like Wolverine's son, the Matt Gargan Venom, and it was like another Thunderbolt. So that was actually a kind of cool story, totally unrelated to the Clone Saga, and far enough separate from all this bullshit that you can actually go, oh, no, that Norman Osborn as basically another version of Lex Luthor was actually kind of cool and makes sense. I still don't like that they brought him back in the first place. It was total bullshit.
Sometimes you will get gold from shit eventually.
Yeah,
like, it just
He's
has
still
to
got
go
that
down
terrible Impossible here, though.
Yeah, a friend of mine was actually saying that to me yesterday, how much he just still hates Norman Osborn's hair to this day. And
I've got a issue of Deadpool, like an annual, where he goes back in time, and it's a Spider-Man comic from the 60s. And they actually take the original art, but replace all the images of Spider-Man with Deadpool, where he's traveled in time into Spider-Man's story, and he's got a hologram. So they literally think he's Spider-Man, but it's Deadpool. And he's going up to Norman Osborn's face and he's going, dude, what's up with your hair?
What is up with that hair? Like, what would that even look like in real life? I wonder. You know,
Cornrows.
brown,
But
orange, brown,
it didn't
orange.
exist in 60s white Euro comics. It doesn't make sense.
I know now we did kind of you mentioned this to me briefly before we started recording. You actually said specifically you weren't going to talk about it, but just
Yeah.
because I
Oh,
had
you're allowed to.
known
I'm not
about
going
it.
to talk about it.
Oh well, I need you to tell us about the most recent attempt that you're aware of that Marvel went back to this Clone Saga and
I'll
tried
give
to.
the summary if you like, because I read
Yes,
it one
please.
day. They basically did Clone Saga 2.0. You know when you get creatively bankrupt and they want to do a story, whether it's the wrestling or the comics, and it's like, let's go nostalgia, let's retouch on a story from 10 or 20 years ago and do another shorter version of it, but let's somehow make it even worse. So Ben Reilly, who got over with the fans as the Scarlet Spider, despite all the badness of the things that happened in the Clone Saga people don't like. The costume was cool. He dyed his hair and he went to work at the Daily Grind and then became the sensational Spider-Man and actually became the new Spider-Man. For better or worse, there was a time where he got over it and he was like cool. And, you know, there's a reason I've got an action figure of him today because there's a character I genuinely love, even though the storyline he came out of was pretty dodgy and it ended poorly with him disintegrating to dust, saving Peter's life and sacrificing himself as he fought the Green Goblin. So, but he died a hero's death, a proper hero's death, like a mythic hero death. This is like, you're never going to touch Ben Reilly again. You're never going to do anything with him again. Years later, this is like post 2010. So sometime in the last 10 years, they brought him back again. Inexplicably, he turned into powder, to dust, to absolutely nothing. The only other Marvel character I know that's come back from that was like Wolverine, which is equally stupid, other than the time wipe over or reset bullshit, alternate reality bullshit. Comes back from literal fucking cornflakes that don't really explain it. He's back. He's not Ben Reilly, even though he is. He's sort of like yet another clone body, but it's his mind from the Ben Reilly we know and love. But now he's the Jackal. Why? I don't know. He's wearing an Anubis mask from Egypt, but he's the Jackal. And he's making cloned versions of all of Spider-Man's villains and Kingpin's dead wife, manipulating people, just being a completely weird, asocial maniac that has really nothing to do with the original character. And it's an awful story. It's just so bad. I read it in one week when I was bored one week, not knowing anything about it, just thinking, okay, it's Spider-Man stuff. And it's probably one of the worst Spider-Man things I've ever read in my life. It's an abomination. It shouldn't exist.
Well, it sounds like hot garbage, and I do appreciate you actually. I know you probably didn't want to talk about it, but I do appreciate you
I
summarizing
generally
it
like
for us.
the Ben Reilly character, and I wish he had lived and become. They had spun him off into the New Warriors a couple of issues. They were going to keep him around as Scarlet Spider. I wish Scarlet Spider had lived, like how Superboy's still around, Jean Paul Valley's still around. They got rehabilitated, they got integrated into the universe. Ben turned into dust by because we're too embarrassed about what we did and how we fucked up the story.
And that's kind of, you know, it's the bittersweet aspect of it, because as much as I was enjoying it at the time, even I had to say from where I left it off, from where I last saw it, it was when the whole Norman Osborn came back and was revealed to be the man. It was
Yeah,
me, Austin. It was me
it was
all
me all
along, Austin.
along. Yeah.
Um,
It was actually Albert Wesker, man. He was NWO, Jill. He was
yeah.
NWO right from day one. You didn't know. I was actually thinking about Resident
Uh,
Evil earlier today. It feels very much like Resident Evil. It was like, oh yeah, it was Albert Wesker all along from like 10 years ago from all those games, but you've never seen him again till now.
Anytime you think it's something different, it's always going to be Umbrella and Albert Wesker
Yeah.
together again. You know, it's going
I
to
don't
be.
mind because in the video games, I don't mind that it's Albert Wesker because it's like it's Resident Evil, it's crazy over the top, it's world-ending shenanigans. When it's New York and it's this one crazy fucking businessman who's psychologically mentally ill because of the potion he took and made him fucked up with the head. I'm like, no, just let him die and go away. Don't bring him back.
I know. Speaking of world-ending shenanigans, I hear Doomsday is coming pretty soon.
Doomsday, like the DC Doomsday.
DC Doomsday, I guess, because we did kind of mention the death of Superman being the catalyst for this, and I suppose it would be appropriate if we do an episode, which I believe you plan to do anyway, on
Yes.
the death of Superman. Are we still on the cards for the death of
Yeah,
Superman?
yeah, we'll do it next week for sure.
Because then Doomsday definitely is coming.
Doomsday is coming. I did read I was very fortunate in the 90s. Like this, in many ways, there was a lot of awesome things happening in the comics. In other ways, long-term fans are like, well, the 90s where comics went to die. There's so many, where all the classic heroes just got fucked over. But there's a lot of good independent stuff. You know, you got Concrete, you got Bone, you got Hellboy, you got Dark Horse. Hey, there's a lot of awesome stuff and Vertigo that was really the best stuff of that decade. But the classic heroes were all getting fucked hard sideways in the 90s.
Oh, yeah. And, you know,
but
look,
Doomsday I do actually like, even though he's a plot MacGuffin, and I did enjoy the trade. My friend picked up the trade, Death of Superman, and it had those, first you just see him like punching. He's trapped underground. He's got this some kind of weird costume and strength, and he's just punching like this, and it's like, Doomsday's coming. So when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, Doomsday's coming.
Yeah, no, I am looking forward to discussing it, because whatever it is, look, it's just a time period I grew up on, because as I was just getting into,
Mel Gibson, Superman, just get a good mullet going. JCVD, it's mullet time.
I had known Superman mainly just from the Christopher Reeve movies, so I was getting into the comics just around the time they were killing him off in the comics. So it was a very it was a very crazy time to be getting in. Just like it was with the Spider-Man clone saga. But like, you know, it's going to be
the Death of Superman trade, and he loaned it to me. And like I loaned him my Batman versus Predator trade, and he loaned me his Death of Superman trade. We used to both ride our push bikes to the comic shop after school and that. Like my best old mate Chris. And then I had another mate, Luke, who bought the Return of Superman trade, and he loaned it to me, and I got to read that. So I got to read that story as well without having to buy it.
You know, like the Spider-Man clone saga might have been, or it was, I suppose, an event within the world of comics, but the Superman was something that kind of had a bit of a mainstream crossover. There was like news reports on it. There was.
See, I loaned those comics from my friend, and then I'm like, I've got all these Spider-Man comics, guys, Spider-Man and clones. Do you want to read any of them? You can borrow them. They're like, no, I'm good. See you later.
Yeah, they weren't discussing the clone saga on the Today Show like they were in Death of Superman.
Yeah. I remember they had the bagged issue that had like a black. It was like a black poly-bagged issue, and it was like, and that's the one that went. Well, I saw it at the comic shop, but I know watching those DC documentaries, they went news agents globally around the world. The actual issue where he died was like, you know, the one that went through the roof of the sales because it was on the bloody mainstream news in America.
It's the famous one. Everybody bought 2 copies, didn't they? One to read and one to keep in the packaging.
Another one to try and resell 20 years later when it's worthless.
Yeah, and it really is worthless. Don't ever pay out the nose for that.
They overprinted everything in the early 90s. Spider-Man, X-Men, Superman, all the Image comics because of the speculative bubble. But that's a whole other crazy topic.
And yeah, and we'll get into the ins and outs of it, because there's you know, the whole death of Superman, just like the Spider-Man clone saga, there's been stuff kind of added on to it since then that kind of makes a bit more sense out of it, but also might detract from it as well, depending on what your point of view is. But we will get into the nitty and the gritty of it.
Funny, just before we finish up, is did you ever read the old letters pages, or I don't know, in your reprints over there? Did you get letters pages? Because when I read the Marvel comics or DC, there would be letter pages. I would read them.
Back page always has the letters.
Yeah. I would read the letters pages or editorials. I was just always that. Like before there was DVD extras, I was that guy. I was always reading this kind of shit, and when there's DVD extras, I'm like, great, sign me up. I want to know the inside baseball and all that shit, and what's going on behind the scenes in wrestling or the baseball and the comics, whatever. In the Superman comics, they did a thing where I'm not sure it was Death of Superman or a few years later where they did the blue costume recostume, but basically they said in the editorial, Superman's going to die. In 12 months we'll be bringing him back again, and blah blah blah. And they did a whole event, and people, oh my god, he's dead. Oh, what's happening? It's like, did no one read that fucking editorial where they literally told you that 12 months later they were going to reset the fucking comic? Because I did. And I was
Notice,
like, what? It's
and
like,
I'm
do you
sure
not
we'll
know
get
this
into
from
it.
decades of comics?
That's the thing, though. Notice, though, that they had a plan with an actual exit point to the
Yes,
plan
they
of when
did.
that
And
story
actually,
was going to.
weirdly, it was like a real kayfabe thing. They really just went, by the way, we're going to do this, and in 12 months it'll all reset and it's kicking off next month. And it's like no one paid attention to it. It's strange.
Told you what was coming. But we're telling you what's coming with Doomsday coming next week. But
It'd
I
be like if they
also
went on,
want
imagine
to.
back in January this year, they went, John Cena's going to turn heel 6 months from now. 2 months after that, he's going to be back to face again. It will be completely fucking pointless. So it's just part of a stupid in-tour thing this year on Netflix.
I do want to know, though, for anybody who's kind of stuck with us today, are you Clone
Oh, they're
Saga
stuck with
fan?
us, Mark. They're stuck. They can't get rid of us. It's like super glue or putty.
Do they think the Clone Saga sucked? Do they like Scarlet Spider? Do they hate Scarlet Spider? Do they think the whole endeavor was a waste of time?
Yeah,
Did they
chuck us a
even
comment. What
notice
was the
this?
best costume redesign? What was the worst element of the Clone Saga?
Am I too harsh on the Grim Hunter? Is he more important than I let on? I don't think so.
Was Jake the Muss your favorite clone?
Was Miles Warren a bit of a perv? Yes, I think we can all
Definitely.
agree he was. And if you want to leave a comment about the appropriateness between a college professor having relationships with his students, anything you want to comment on. There's no sacred cows here on the
Yeah, and
Bojo
those
show.
original stories go back to like the swinging 60s. It was like Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, and it's like you'd be a bit jealous of all this business going on.
Mm-hmm. The type of thing that might raise an eyebrow or two these days, but
Yeah.
nobody cared back then, it seems. But we're happy to revisit this stuff, happy to chat about it. I've had a great time, glad to be back in the seats chatting with my good buddy Johnny about this stuff. So definitely let us know what you think, and please do catch up with us again next week when we start talking about the death of Superman. Remember also, with great power comes great responsibility, unless you're a clone, because, in that case,
Yeah.
look, you're just some test tube clone thing. It's not your fault you even exist. So, don't worry
True.
about taking responsibility for your power. It's
If you're
totally
writer or
cool out of
editor,
your
you
hands.
have zero responsibility. That's what we learned. It's today's lesson.
You have the responsibility to your mental health to quit the job if you just get sick of writing
Yeah,
this shit.
that's the weirdest thing. Some people did actually leave over because eventually they got so sick of it. It's like, just end the story. Want to get off these damn books already? I forget who, but one of the writers was quoted as saying, "It's like writing chapter 2 of a novel over and over again, not knowing when or if it's ever going to end."
Yeah. The snake eating its own tail. But yeah,
Yeah.
I did enjoy looking back on it all and reminiscing. And yeah, great time as always.
Oh yeah, we'll catch you next week, and we'll be checking out Kal-El, the Man of Tomorrow, this last son of Krypton.
Take care, folks. Have a good one.